How are you doing? Good evening over there, right? It's 4 p.m.
It's 4 p.m., so it's midday. I'm doing well. How are you? How are things on your end?
I just had my breakfast of the day and truly enjoyed it. I'm eating more, not in content prep, so all is well in the world, man. How you been?
Uh,
How's everything going for you?
I'm doing really well, actually. Had a few client sessions this morning. Then had a nice break over the midday, and later on after the podcast, we I have another few private sessions in the evening, and yeah, some more work to do for online clients later on, and that'll be probably most of my day today.
It's great to hear, man. And where to begin? I think it was through Steve's podcast, the Revive Stronger podcast, that I came to your profile and to, well, obviously your research, but you as a person, I think it was
Oh
through
yeah.
him. But one thing that really pops out from your presence in social media is how you present yourself, how you make space for doubt. It's something I want to ask you about, to uncertainty, because goddamn, in science, it's like the more you dig into a whatever topic, the less you are certain about what you thought you knew, and that's what I love about your publications. I kid you not, man. Pretty much every single one you post, I first like it and then I save it to read it further. And it's real, man. So
That's
thanks for that, man. I must say.
That's much appreciated, man. And thank you for inviting me and the opportunity. It's a huge honor for you for giving me even the platform to chat a bit and talk shop about hypertrophy and training. We can also chat guitars. We can go on for 2 more hours just guitars. So that's also fine.
You read my mind, man. The first thing that I wanted to ask you are not even academic or research related. I wanted to ask you if you're still into music, if you're still playing. Do you have any time left in the day for that?
Um, Currently not so as much as I would hope. I haven't played actually in a few months. We actually moved apartments just very recently, so we kind of settled in, and yeah, with all the research going, posts, clients, it just I have a bit less time than I would like to kind of properly sit down and practice. Um, you remember that episode we've chatted and we've kind of I don't know, last year, sometime last year, we chatted briefly. I ended up selling that one. It
Ah,
really pained me. It really pained me, but I still have my strats. So so for anyone listening, like, what the fuck are we just talking about? It's types of guitars.
I'm sure they don't mind, man. And of course, I remember that was our first the first interactions that we had before
Yeah.
even me asking you about doing this and I don't know whatever shop related. And actually, man, speaking of guitars, I pretty much always, even if I'm playing or not, have mine next to me. I guess just for luck. I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, man, I love this fucking thing.
Yeah,
And
I have mine somewhere in the back in the case. Not even I have a real small amp here, but I haven't played like literally in a few months. So I don't know if I can even play. It's
it's
one.
it's all muscle memory. I'm sure you can,
It
man.
is. It is.
It's kind of funny, because I'm well aware that you've worked with him. Well, actually, with both of them. Brad Schoenfeld is a well-known jazz guy. He plays piano,
Yeah.
and also my man Pac, Doctor Pac. It's more of a hip hop head, and also Mr. Doctor Eric Helms. It's also a hip hop head. So music kind of runs in the family, right?
Yeah, I suppose it does. Music for me was kind of my first love, and how I owe a lot to music. Aside of training and science, I kind of found training after the music. But music played a huge role in my life and kind of development and upbringing. So, I mean, the lifestyle came with it to an extent in my teenager years. So that's kind of it's funny because that kind of transitioned me into training and working out later on. So I kind of replaced some old bad habits to an extent with newer habits. But all in all, music gave me a really positive outlook on life and really a nice way of kind of expressing myself. So that's really cool.
Echo that, brother. Man, my brother from another mother. Same to me, except that I never really got into, the rock and roll side of things. Let's talk alcohol and whatever substance abuse you might want to. It
Yeah,
never
it's
really,
not that I did as well, too much, but
yeah,
some drinking in teenager years, like what's typical for that puberty stage. But later on, I've had some. I don't know. I've developed over the years some of the health related stuff that I just kind of dropped everything, and I just training became my primary thing.
yeah. For me, at least, I want to hear, of course, your experience. I didn't do well in school. I actually failed. Well, here we call it high school. It's preparatoria. I failed at children. So I kind of fell into a sort of void of years. And that's when I first started training. I don't know, how did you make the switch from arts, from music to research management, to particular resistance training? How was it for you?
Um, so as I've said, music was a really big piece of my life. But funny thing is that for my kind of specialty, high school, I've actually went for like web design, so development. So I'm kind of my primary education, high school degree to an extent. That's how it works here in Croatia. Is actually that I'm a web developer as my primary kind of high school education diploma to an extent, and then I've kind of transitioned. But um, I started working out sometime, I don't know, 2013, late 2013, early 2014, something like that. I've developed, some kind of health issues that I was constantly getting sick. I was, allergies, yada, yada, yada. Health, I mean, general nutrition was just plain shit, to be honest. Like, and I don't know what kind of drove me to the decision, like, hey, I could probably start working out, just out of the blue. But I vividly remember, and I think I've chatted this with Steve also, but I kind of was introduced to the whole training by Mike Chang and six pack shortcuts. And that's my baseline, six pack shortcuts as my starting point, and then I kind of, after a few months of training at home, following their workouts or the, what was it called, the afterburn effect, where you just a bunch of supersets, drop sets for the abs, left and right, a gazillion like different ab exercises. I went to the gym. I think it was actually like the end of 2013, and I've never looked back on honestly. So that's not really a much grandiose transition, but just it came about. I don't know.
I'm just realizing we have a lot in common, man. Mike Chang, of course, I recall from those days, it was my man Scott Herman Fitness, something like that, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. It was also this guy, I don't know if you remember him, Scooby, always wore
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Fitness hat, but those were my
Yeah, it
guys,
was
man.
also I was a lot on Reddit at the time, bodybuilding Reddit and bodybuilding.com forums. So there was also at the time it was Beast Mode Jones, Chris Jones,
Oh, shit, man, of course.
uh, Christian Guzman, Max Chewing, then also Matt August, of course. Those are the OGs. Jeff Side. But also Louis Marco was the one who was reporting on a lot of bodybuilding stuff that was going on. So yeah, I've been around the circles for a long time. Like um, at least just lurking in the background. But yeah,
Oh, that's awesome, man. Beast Mode. I used to watch those videos, eating out, not pigging out, on
yeah,
his advice on retracting the scapula for your pressing, and that was me, man, retracting the scapula on every single opportunity that I had. But it's fascinating how some people can take different life choices, and you actually chose the let's say the Jedi way of going into research and actually exploring and learning and educating yourself alongside coaching people, which can be a little bit, I don't know, kind of hard because we always want to extract practical applications from the research. which is not always the case. And you recently, well, most recently had this post on your Instagram, by the way, about mechanisms and outcomes that I found really fascinating. I actually dig into the several papers that you posted there. And one that was super funny was the cigarettes one. I actually
No, yeah.
wrote a blog entry on that one. So I think that's a great segue, man, to talk about your research because you have, if I'm not mistaken, close to 15 published papers as of today. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty, you cover a lot of topics, man, not just muscle lengths, but also these other, it was the, I think Adam is his first name, the one with the advanced techniques. And well,
Yeah.
anyway,
Adam Gonzalez. Yeah.
that very same one. Yeah, of course. What got you into research and more specifically, range of motion, because when you dig into resistance training, man, there's a lot of topics that you can really dig into. But what got you into those, man?
Specifically into research is not something that I've ever intended. It was not like you know, pre-planned. Something that I saw for myself like early on. As I said, went into kinesiology degree after I paused after high school. So around from I've enrolled into uni actually at 21. So from the age of kind of 18, 19 up until 21, I paused after high school for 1 year or two. I've kind of worked as a freelance web developer for a year. Then I've started with some like media degree. Didn't like it, didn't see myself doing that and IT being in IT for like the rest of my life. It just didn't. Training gave me so much. Training gave me so much that I've kind of had this obligation to an extent that I've. It gave me so much positive things in life and so much positive outlooks on life. Here's the Coleman et al. Two goats. Hi, man.
It's just one, man. The goal is right here. I'm just a messenger,
Um,
man.
yeah, but it gave me so much that I've kind of my primary mission statement is sometimes I'm like repeat myself over and over, but if I could provide the same positive benefits of trying to, showing someone how beautiful resistance training can be and how much improvements you can get out of it, I'd be I'll be pretty happy and fulfilled by doing that. And that kind of led me to kinesiology itself, studying exercise science, sports science. And pretty early on, like it didn't start off like that, but in our first semester of uni, we had like a bunch of different like fundamental courses like anatomy, biomechanics, science of like scientific methodology, introduction to scientific methodology. And that's my kind of introduction to science itself. I've never been brought up to think scientific or was never, at least for me personally, it wasn't too, I wasn't brought up with like thoughts to critically think about things and to ask questions. It was more so like, okay, you've served me this, it's a fact, go run with it. And then when I kind of was introduced to, oh, look, there's a whole systematic, objective way of going about things, learning, producing new knowledge. We do this, we observe something in the world around us. We formulate hypotheses, we test those hypotheses over and over again, and we make conclusions or kind of predictions based off that, and then move on. And yeah, that all of that kind of sounded really intriguing, to be honest. It was a whole new, outlook on life and um, world around me, and that kind of led me to, I could probably this sounds really intriguing. This sounds really interesting, and I love training. And it was also at the time, so that was 2018 2018, where I was drop sets were still, a thing, like a really big thing. They're a big thing now, but at the time they were even a bigger thing. Like all those purported benefits of training, fast failure, metabolic stress, higher fatigue being a cause of hypertrophy, yada yada yada. And that was like, okay, let me just try and explore what there is on the topic at the time. I've contacted Brad, and he was very open to it. That was, for me at the time, I was in my late finishing up first year, starting my second year of uni, and just contacting Brad out of blue, and he was like very welcoming and open to, yeah, sure, let's collaborate on a project. Let's do this study. Let's run a drop set versus traditional training study. Like 10 months later, we did so. We wrote up the paper, published it, and I was hooked really on that. From that point forward, I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life, or I want to do this as a part of my career at least. I still coached less at the time. I was just kind of starting in. I had only a few clients, or I've trained just a few people at that point. But so okay, I could probably do this by doing some, teaching or lecturing down the line. That was my kind of goal of getting into academia and teaching, plus also coaching on the side and producing or doing research. So, kind of, what is now 2026, 7 years later, I can tell I'm on the right path probably toward that goal, more or less, at least.
So cool to hear. I actually have that one published 2021, right? The Dropsets one. And moving forward to your, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, your PhD thesis, the one with the,
Yeah.
well, the meta analysis. If you agree, I'd love to discuss that one because there's a certain name that continuously blows my mind with what he shares on social media, which is James Steele, my guy. I barely understand that man sometimes, but I try my best because I know there's so much value there. I wanted to ask, yes, of course, about muscle length and its current applications, but more so the some of the decisions that you made on that particular line of work. Because, for instance, the first thing that comes to mind is that it's a Bayesian analysis. So that gives more room for uncertainty, and it also allows us to explore a variable in a continuous way. So why did you guys go with that, and what have you learned from there? What was your prior assumptions? Please, man, feel
Okay,
free to.
so the decision you asked me that before. So decision, I've started my PhD program 2022. I think, yeah, 2022, fall of 2022. And at the time, like just earlier that year, Milo's meta-analysis was published on the topic, and range of motion just blew up. Like muscle length were, even though muscle length as a concept of hypertrophy, with regard to hypertrophy at least, was around for already 10 years prior to that. But that paper really gave it some fresh outlook on or interest at least in the variable. And yeah, that was kind of my okay. So we have around 5 to 6 studies that directly compared partial range of motion versus partial range of motion at longer muscle lengths versus full range of motion. It's something that the effect estimates points toward potentially being greater with partial range of motion or length of partials. But the overall certainty in those estimates wasn't really clear. So there's potential avenue to kind of explore this specific research question. We're now 4 years later in, 3.5 years later in, and there's a whole bunch of new papers that come out in that time period. Some of those, as I said, were mine, only a few. We still have a few more to go, but a lot of work from Stian Larsson's lab, from Stian Larsson and the crew from Lehman College came out with those with regards to those. There's a few more labs, one in Germany, also Cassiano from Brazil. All of different groups were studying this kind of concepts of training at different muscle lengths. So my primary, like a PhD topic or a thesis like title, is the effects of training at varying muscle lengths and muscle actions on regional hypertrophy. So we're kind of combining three different concepts, exploring three different concepts, or at least two, on hypertrophy. But as to your question regarding the meta-analysis itself, so it's not when you said like our analysis allowed us to explore in a continuous fashion. It's not necessarily inherent to Bayesian analysis. You can also do that in a typical frequentist framework where you would be testing hypotheses and you would observe the p-values, but it's more so kind of way of structuring the data. Are you going to go with binary, like a yes or no question, black or white, or are you going to continuously like plot it on a x and y axis and see the general slope of changes in between the dependent and independent variable? But as to your question, why we went with Bayesian is that, I mean, James is known for his kind of more black-pilled stance on things in like in the field in general. Is a bit more like let's just call him a bit more conservative to an extent, or more like not too optimistic or about the things or the effects, and that's completely fine. That's reasonable. He's Steve and Eric actually mentioned him briefly in the latest episode of Five Stronger, but is a bit more of a data guy, and you have to respect that. And he's done huge amounts of huge meta-analysis with huge data sets, and he kind of derives his kind of thoughts based off of those. And it's a fact that a lot of studies that we do in the field are generally underpowered to detect the effects that we're kind of trying to observe. So that there's always that hint that in the back of my mind, and more recently, at least, I can say that I was to an extent, influenced by him with that I'm kind of getting slow black pilled. I'm gray pilled at this point. But yeah, sorry for rambling. With regard to Bayesian analysis, what Bayesian framework allows us to do is feed prior beliefs or prior information. So for example, let's say that we have a certain like belief of what effects can we observe or expect from, I don't know, comparing two interventions, I don't know, shortened partials versus lengthened partials. We can actually directly feed that effect, that estimate, into our current Bayesian model and use that to derive a more precise estimate or potential range where true effect might lie. So that's a really nice and neat way of using Bayesian analyses to use that prior evidence. Because if you think about it, you're never actually starting from a blank slate. You always have kind of an assumption of the effect or directionality of that effect, or how certain you are about one intervention being better or worse than the other. Again, you can directly or indirectly feed that information into your model for analyses. And one of my, for a lot of us, so both Brad and I won't say like for certain, but at least the general evidence at the time did kind of lean toward when prior studies measured regional hypertrophy, there was some trends or favoring toward distal growth being greater distal growth when training at longer muscle lengths. And that was my kind of also initial assumption or hypothesis that we would observe greater distal effects compared to with training at longer muscle lengths compared to shortened or shorter muscle lengths. But as it turned out, not really much, at least at the time, based on our models, both for the effects did lean toward being greater. So from proximal to mid belly to distal side, there was a linear increase in effects, but those effects estimates were very, very small, almost trivial. So it begs the question of, okay, if that's something that we consider like practically worthwhile or interesting even, or is it pretty much the same, throughout proximal, middle, and distal sites, or I mean, all regions of the muscle. But important caveat here to mention is that a lot of the studies that we've analyzed in that paper, specifically the contrast, so the mean difference between group or condition that performs shortened bias training or lengthened bias training, or training at shorter or longer muscle lengths, it was only around 21% difference. So that's a very, very small difference, between general average muscle length. So are you really expecting to observe much? I don't know. When you put it like that, and with my kind of sense now, not really, to be honest. If the contrast or the difference was much greater, perhaps I'm open to change my mind on that. That potentially we would observe greater effects, but at this point, it is what it is.
I think it's really interesting because when you dig into each particular study, you're going to find a lot of limitations. One, most of them are underpowered. But I actually had that conversation with Dr. De Souza, that how hard is it for you guys to actually get participants for your study? The not only the expense, the monetary expense, but the man hours, because you need to have people there taking care of the people training and the adherence from those very same people. How hard is it to do studies, particularly in Croatia, for instance?
Um, in our case, we have some pros and cons in our case, because I've actually talked with both Jeremy Adquiere a few months back, and recently with Ryan Burke as well, that for example, in the US, generally MRI is extremely expensive for an hour, like a session. I think they settle at around $1,000 per session, which is huge. I may be overestimating, but a huge sum. Here in Croatia, it's around 150 per hour euros. So around, I don't know, 175, something like that. So it's way cheaper. So we could get, it's a really nice way we could get MRI here more easily. We could get more robust methods, but at the same time, we don't have a lot of manpower. So we can kind of recruit the participants, but in the uni where I am, in our lab specifically for motor control, we only have it's me as a PhD candidate and one or other lab student. That's it. So it's only two of us. For the last study that we did for isometrics versus full range of motion, there were three of us, but mostly it came up to me and my friend who did actually my colleague who did both the supervision of the training sessions and ultrasound measurements. And that's it. So we're kind of limited on manpower, but recruitment in general, it's not unique to our lab. Recruitment is generally really hard, especially for getting trained participants, well-trained participants in, because you have to account, or those people have to stop their training regimens for 8 to 10, 12 weeks. There's not a lot of really advanced lifters that would be comfortable doing that. And we had, when we were advertising for the study, we had over 100 participants inquire us for that, and we came down to 25. When we kind of explained to them, look, you can't train outside of this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Somewhere, we even had a 6 week. So even 6 weeks was too much for some of those. Some have, I may not be able to kind of commit to even doing 6 weeks. It's not even that I wouldn't want to train, or I wouldn't want to stop doing my own training for 6 weeks. It's just I can't commit to doing 6 weeks, 2 times per week. And so it's a really it's a struggle, not to be honest.
Honestly, I think it's, for me at least, super interesting to get to ask you the guys behind the research. What is it like to actually do research? Because in social media, it's so easy to criticize. Oh, but the sample size. Oh, but those were untrained subjects. Oh, but the length of the study. The typical criticisms, which of course are valid. But man, I can only imagine the difficulties and then the frustration when you present your research in social media. But before going into that rabbit hole, I'm glad that you mentioned it because that paper, the effects of long muscle length isometric versus full range of motion, isotonic training, so on and so forth,
It's a mouthful.
it's
It's a
quite a
mouthful.
title, man. I love it because it it mixes a lot of concepts that often get mixed up in social media or when one reads scientific research. For instance, one that tends to be used as synonyms, which are not actually synonyms, is stretch mediated hypertrophy and training at longer muscle lengths. And also that when we talk about concentric, concentric or eccentric contractions, it's not really the case. It's not
Yeah,
particularly correct to say that. And that paper, the one that with long title, I think it does a great job in clarifying and also putting it into a really interesting test that perhaps when one thinks about it, sorry if I'm mixing up, it's just a lot of concepts. Um, when one thinks about, let's say, isotonic, I don't know, the first one that comes to mind usually are planks, but we need to analyze how are those planks being performed, right? They're not on a longer muscle length. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but can you clarify a little bit of this terminology and why is it important to understand this particular paper?
sure. So it's isometrics for planks are isometrics, not isotonic. So
Oh,
isotonics would
sorry, man.
no,
Sorry.
it's fine. Isotonics would constitute just a normal like full range motion,
Mm,
like full flexion and full
right.
extension. But isometrics typically, when people think about isometric training, planks really do come to mind very frequently, and also wall sits. Those are,
Oh,
group
yeah.
settings. Wall sits are the king for quads.
With the plates
But
on your legs, right?
yeah, yeah, with plates. Um, but there's there's an important like difference between when you perform isometric training, you can perform them. I've just had a post yesterday on this. You can perform them as pushing. So your intent uh, is to overcome a weight. So, for example, think about a leg extension, and let's say you put a max weight on your stack, and you just try to push it and you can't move it. That's an overcoming isometrics or pushing isometrics. Conversely, if you think about, I don't know, if you think about a wall sit and you placed a lot of plates on yourself or really made it hard, you're holding actually. That's a holding isometric, and you're kind of trying to resist the lengthening or eccentric portion of the movement. So those are two different types of isometrics. Really, really important, it seems, at least based on current evidence, is that muscle length, just as it is in isotonic or dynamic training, muscle length is a really important mediator of response, general training response to isometric training as well. So, for example, in planks, you would actually those are not your ab muscles, your abdominal muscles are not really trained at longer muscle lengths. They would be, you could do them, for example, if you sat down on a really declined bench, so where your torso is kind of being extended here, or from the if you lie down on the glute ham developer and you really extend it far back, then you would kind of be stretching. But based on current evidence, we have about 6 studies that directly compare isometric training at shorter versus longer muscle lengths. And typically, the effects were either null, very similar, or mostly kind of leaning toward greater effects when training performed at longer muscle lengths.
Yeah, I actually do those, well, in a isotonic fashion. It kind of seems at first like dangerous or what is this guy doing stretching his back like that? But yeah, I totally do those. And one thing that leads me to the next topic that I wanted to ask. Is about mechanisms, because we can speculate, let's say, longer muscle length training, about passive tension, about different perhaps mechanism sensors, about tightening even. So when we speak about mechanisms in social media, that, well, makes us sound smarter, and that's not always the case. I wanted to ask your opinion. How do you balance when you're doing research and when you are in your other areas of expertise? Well, lines of work, let's call it that way, which is social media. How can you make, let's say, better communication when you only have mechanisms and you don't have, let's say, studies that report outcomes?
Yeah, that was a whole shitstorm earlier last year. A lot of discussions were very like different opinions on the matter on how one to approach, kind of making conclusions or coming up with conclusions and recommendations. And my general stance, I think I've been very open about it, very clear about my kind of position here is that you cannot necessarily draw from mechanisms alone. A lot of so from my understanding, the argument being made was that if you have a very sound rationale or mechanism, you can predict any kind of outcome. But you have to think about it's the logic here and how did you even come up with a proposed mechanism in the first place? You have to have some kind of data to kind of derive a potential explanation or a mechanism for the change or the observation that you made. So you've made that mechanism, you've kind of that observation is based off of prior data, So it's not really that, it just came out of thin air. It just, here for you. It's a mechanism. Mechanical tension is a mechanism. No, you've actually kind of derived data from prior either signaling studies or in rats or whatever kind of different signaling pathways or interactions that occurred that you've kind of observed, and you kind of built up a framework of potential explanation. Okay, so we do this, this happens, but in my mind, with mechanisms specifically, like human body isn't a single mechanism. Human body is not a single cell. It's a very, very complex system of different systems actually, and the interaction between those systems is what drives, I don't know, some change or some outcome to occur. So really pinning down an exact specific mechanism for the observation or so for a single observation is really not, in my mind, best way to go about things. Because you're kind of really trying to be very specific and very certain about some of the things. But science is everything but not certain. It's very much uncertain.
I just couldn't find it for the life of me, but there was this philosopher that said something like causation, the cause of something causing something else, was merely a psychological, let's say, assumption from our minds, from our human minds. I owe you the name, and if I find it, I'll
Okay,
DM to you.
send it to me. Send it to me. But yeah, I, like I think I made that example. It was my last one on the same topic was for the cigarettes paper, but earlier on it was rest intervals, I think, and hormones. So the hormone hypothesis that acute spikes in testosterone or growth hormone post either very short bouts of resistance training or shorter rest periods would over the long term accumulate and result in a greater hypertrophy. We know that's not the case with like a plethora of evidence supporting that the endogenous hormone levels aren't really predictive of hypertrophy outcomes. So in this case, you have a potential mechanism, explanatory mechanism like hormones being anabolic hormones. We know they are good, but they are good in exogenous fashion. So when you pin a needle in your ass, but in normal physiological ranges, those don't do much to kind of augment your hypertrophy response following a specific training intervention.
Yeah, that leads me to another paper recently published by the team from George Phillips's lab in McMaster University, the one
Ben
with
Avery.
the MITS mechanisms. Van Avery, we just had a conversation with
Yeah.
him about the cell swelling, the pump, which are not the same. This confusions that come to mind always in social media. What's your stance there, man? Because I think that's a really spicy one. Because let's say, as a trainee or perhaps as a trainer, there is a little bit of value in at least, I don't know,
Mhm.
sensing the exercise being performed, right?
Yeah, that was my kind of initial. So, like the benefit of the thing is that a lot of people kind of combine muscle swelling, actual muscle swelling, with increases in muscle thickness. So that's their kind of that they are used as a synonym. So 1-to-1. It isn't necessarily the case. So we have a few studies that measured acute changes in muscle thickness following workout, and then following 8 weeks or 10 weeks of training, do those changes actually correspond to greater muscle hypertrophy? So could you, for example, if you did just gonna use, so you perform one exercise versus the other exercise, and one exercise acutely resulting in greater muscle thickness change, do those also stack up or kind of correspond with after 8 weeks of? So if you could actually use acute change in muscle thickness to kind of predict hypertrophy over the long term. And as I said, it's a really interesting concept. And for a coach like you, like me, or even for you as a professional athlete, it'd be kind of it'd be valuable, because you could actually you could specify, or rather make your training decisions a bit more prompt or even more individualized. For example, if you kind of perform two exercises and you've noticed that one in particular results in a greater pump, for example, and that's consistent in, like, for several weeks, you consistent pumps day in, day out, you don't change anything regarding peri-nutrition, intra-nutrition, intra-workout, peri-workout, so anything with regards to kind of quick glycogen replenishment and anything. So everything stays the constant, and you like consistently see feel at least greater pump following exercise A versus exercise B. I mean, that'd be cool if it after, I don't know, 6 months you really did get greater growth with exercise A versus exercise B. It make your coaching decisions a lot faster, a lot quicker, at least. And that's the thing, where we have muscle thickness changes, acute muscle thickness changes, but they are not really correspondent to the pump or your perception of the pump. So in this case, we still would have to have a study that would compare, on a scale of, I don't know, 0 to 10, with 10 being the greatest pump ever, whether the greatest amounts of pump, your perception of pump corresponds to greatest amount of swelling, measured by muscle thickness changes. And if that corresponds well, the next study would be to kind of compare one exercise versus the other and see acutely whether one results in greater muscle thickness increase and greater perception of pump, and then complete that after 8 to 10, 12-week training intervention. And if that all adds up, then you have a really good predictive model for, I guess the pump could be used as a potential proxy to kind of make our exercise selection choices, and to kind of come up with better individualized programs, where you wouldn't have to necessarily spend, I don't know, 6 months doing one exercise and 6 months doing other exercise. Those coaching decisions could be a bit faster.
Please tell me if I'm not spitting the soup out. But as far as I know, is I think it's Takahiro from Japan are actually working on something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Man, that
Uh,
would be so cool.
Yeah, we have scoping reviewing plan. So that was pre-registered like 2 years ago now, where we would kind of aggregate all of the evidence of trying to
Right.
find different proxies. Those would include EMG, MRI, actually T2 MRI, deoxygenation, and also the muscle thickness changes, and whether those acute differences or acute responses would actually predict long-term growth. And yeah, Takahiro, which is under supervision by Eric Helms, is doing his PhD on that topic. So he'll be exploring a bunch of different, some of those variables and seeing how predictive they are of long-term hypertrophy. So really, really cool area of research, and I really look forward to seeing that in the next few years.
Likewise, man. It's a great time to be a gym rat. Thanks to guys like you. Thanks to all of the amazing team of people that you work with that I'm fortunate enough to talk to. And almost to finish off and be respectful of your time, Dorian, because you have three hats: the researcher, the trainer, and also doing social media. What do you find the most difficult to communicate on each one of those? Because it's not the same to communicate with a client as a personal trainer,
Mhm.
to get a message across on social media, and then to have the sufficient scientific scrutiny when you're talking about whatever topic. What do you find it's the hardest on each one of those?
For me personally, to be completely honest, it's to kind of, at this point at least, to kind of keep points succinct. To an extent, I can go on and blab on for like hours. When you might have noticed, I can jump from left to right, up and down on a lot because I would really want to kind of cover everything. But the real expertise is really shown in you trying being very, very specific with your answers, which I'm trying to be better at, but I'm still learning to kind of not go on too much of a tangent as I'm doing clearly now. But
Oh, the irony, man.
but with social media specifically, it's real. I enjoy doing that, but Instagram itself is really limiting me sometimes to uh, be a bit more go into a bit more depth and nuance than I would like. For example, if I were writing a blog post as Greg did for Stronger by Science, when blogs were much more favorable media than they are these days, I'd be more inclined to writing those. I'm fairly more a written person than I am like a communicative. I mean, I can chat for hours and I can do presentation and I can do lectures, but it's more so I can write. I think at least now I can write a much more detailed, long form article than I can anything else. With regards to the social media specifically, also, I'm trying to keep a balance, of how I'm directly communicating things, how much information would I really want to put in a specific post or not. It's a really, kind of a balancing act of not being too much, but also not being too little information for what I at least would like to see or read from somebody. But you can't please everyone, man. That's unfortunate. But I'm trying to strike a middle ground here with that. As it relates to clients, it really depends on the type of client I'm working with. So with a lot of majority of my in-person clients are like recreational lifters, or just mainly training for like health stuff and some body recomposition, strength, power, hypertrophy, but it's not their primary like life goal or main goal. I have a much more specific pool of clients online that are more interested in like, okay, let's try and maximize hypertrophy, or let's try and maximize strength, or do as much as we can both both worlds at the same time. Um, so my kind of communication also depends on the type of client. Where with in-person clients, I'm not really trying to convey the scientific message or scientific role. With them, I'm just trying to explain to them broader concepts. Like, look, it's really important for you. It's probably important for you to train at least a few times a week, hit the same muscle group a few times a week, because it's yada yada yada, but won't go into too much depth unless they really specifically ask for or want to know more. Because with in-person specifically, my whole gist is that I really want to equip them with knowledge, that they know how to set up a proper structured training program, just learn them the basic principles of trying to achieve or attain a progressive overload, what a high intensity of effort means, training volume, some basic fundamentals of, as Eric Helms would say, the fundamentals of the pyramid. And after a while, I'm probably not needed to them anymore. As when you get a gist of those fundamentals, you're good. You're good to go. With where in regards to online clients specifically, those are, they would ask a bit more in depth, and then I can put on my scientific hat on, and I can blab for, a bit while.
Glad that you mentioned that bit about it's not about conveying a scientific message to the world and be labeled as a evidence-based practitioner, and that gets lost on social media because I think well, at least for you guys as researchers, you easily tend to get labeled as, I don't know, I can think of Dr. Prague being labeled as the minimum dose guy. I can think about Milo as being labeled length and partials, so on and so
Stretch guy.
forth. The stress, which he really squeezed the juice out of that one, man. But what I'm trying to say is that science, the scientific process, it's a process. It's not an ideology. It's not something you have to wave a flag that I'm science and this other guy is not science. I
Yeah,
find it really unhelpful and perhaps even counterproductive.
completely agree, man. A lot of things that I do, especially with in-person clients, those that are not primarily focused on hypertrophy, like maximizing all aspects of their training. I'll do some stuff that is just, what the fuck are you doing? Why? Like there's even if there's no zero like amount of evidence currently on some of the things, we'll do them, incorporate them just for the I'm much more flexible because I believe in much more flexibility with those types of clients, because that kind of so flexibility so I wouldn't so this wouldn't get taken the wrong way, but flexibility in means of, if we do a specific exercise this week because you just don't want to, fine, fine. It won't be the end of the world. But next week we're back on track. I try to keep them consistent, but there would be some times where they'd be just like long day after work or stress, kids, wife, job, whatever, and they are just not feeling it. We're trying to push as much as we can, but okay, we'll drop the volume. Or do you want to do a specific other type of exercise that you would potentially enjoy more? So, for example, let's say I had incline curls programmed for them in that specific session, but they don't want to do that. They want to do, I don't know, Bayesian curls. Fine, man, whatever. You're performing elbow flexion. Come on, it's not the end of the world. You won't be losing gains. So that kind of flexibility really, from my experience at least, allows for a greater adherence. It's not that I'm trying to make the workouts fun. It's not about being fun. It's more about them enjoying the process and being really why introspectively thinking to themselves, why are they doing this in the first place?
Yeah, totally. And one other example that came to mind is, I don't know, let's talk about lateral races that, oh, but I didn't have the cable available to me in the hotel. I'm on vacation, or I just simply don't like the one I have on my gym. Can I do dumbbells? But oh, the lengthened
Yeah,
bias,
yeah.
it's okay, man. It's still a shoulder abduction, right?
Pretty much. We tend to, especially in social media, we tend to overfocus on things like small differences. Like, come on, man. Over the long term, none of this shit matters. Like, to be completely honest, like it may matter for you, it may matter for Steve, Eric, anyone who's stepping on the bodybuilding stage. All of the little small things that you can do to absolutely squeeze out every small amount of juice. Sure. But for me, I'm a recreational lifter. I'm not competing at this point. So, whatever I do, it's fine. If I'm not in my usual surroundings or my usual gym, I'll just do whatever the primary function of that specific muscle is, or very similar variation of the lift that I tend to do, and I'll call it a day.
Yeah, but if you're working with Eric, I'm sure sooner or later his love of the sport of the bodybuilding sport is contagious. So it wouldn't surprise me to see you stepping on stage, man.
We'll see. We'll see. It wasn't in the cards a few years back, but you never know. You never know.
You never know, and I'm glad. What what category would you be interested in competing in?
I'm too small for anything else than men's physique, so probably men's physique.
Ah, man, as naturals, we're all too small. I can tell you that. It's more illusion than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my man. So just to finish off in time, one last question to you. What is
Shoot.
your dream guitar, man? If you have all the money in the world,
Oh,
all the
man.
time to play the damn thing, uh, let's not not just guitar. What is your dream guitar and your ideal amp?
Fender Twin Reverb
Oh, my man, old school.
and Stevie Ray Vaughan's Strat,
Oh,
signature
but
Strat.
which one? The one that SRB or the one I think it's called Lenny?
Yeah, the later one.
There's Yeah, man, those are beautiful guitars. There's some custom shop
Yeah,
master builds by John
yeah,
Cruz, which go
yeah.
for for an absurd amount of money. So
A huge sum of money. The sum that I probably, as a researcher, won't be able to afford ever. So, if there's anyone, any potential clients listening to this, just drop in your, call me, send inquiries so I can buy myself a really nice guitar.
we can all chip in, man. If I ever become a multimillionaire, you can count on the guitar, you can count on that amp, and even if you want the this pedal, what's his name? The clone pedal. If you're familiar with that one, I'm gonna gift it to you, man. You deserve it for all your hard work you put into this gym
Well,
rat stuff.
I appreciate that.
Dorian, so it's been a huge pleasure. In a couple of days, I'll be uploading this as is, no edits, no funky, nothing on YouTube, so people can watch it a little bit more
Awesome.
comfortably than on Instagram. So, my man, I cannot thank you enough, not just for the live stream itself, but for all the work that you do on the research and also social media. Because, like I told you, every single post that you put out, I like it, I save it, and I save it for further reading. So I learned a
Thank
lot
you.
from you,
Thank you.
man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity. It was a really pleasurable chat. We can go on for hours. Um, and also thank you for everything that you've done. Even though it's not particularly specifically in English, I did for some of the posts or some of your blog posts. I did go to just Google Translate and translate it into English because I was interested. So thank you for all the work and also for the platform you're giving every different researcher that you've had on. I for sure appreciate it, and I'm sure they do as well. So thank you.
Oh my man, you're gonna make me blush. And if you ever find any stupid things that I said, even if it's through Google Translate on the blog, please let me know, man. You can call me out, man. No hard feelings there.
All right.
So hope you have a great rest of the day, Dorian. Also, I was researching, but I wanted to get it right. Is it Varović?
Varović.
Varović. Oh, close enough, man. Close enough.
Close
So
enough. Close enough.
I
Yeah.
don't want to take any more of your time. Hope you have a good rest of the day, and thanks again, man.
Thank you so much to you too, and talk soon. Bye.